In the quiet hours of the night, when the world grows still but your mind does not, anxiety often reveals its most potent form. Perhaps you recognize this familiar visitor, the racing thoughts that circle endlessly, the tightness in your chest that seems to compress your very breath, the persistent whisper that something is wrong or about to go wrong. This experience, so universal yet so isolating, connects us in our shared humanity even as it convinces us we are utterly alone. Anxiety has become the shadow companion of our modern existence. We live in an age of unprecedented complexity and constant change, where information floods our consciousness at every moment, and uncertainty has become our only certainty. The ancient nervous system that once protected us from predators now misfires in board meetings, during social gatherings, or as we scroll through the endless stream of digital content. Our bodies respond to emails as if they were approaching tigers, to deadlines as if they were impending natural disasters. The Buddha, over 2,500 years ago, recognized this fundamental aspect of human suffering. Though he did not use the word anxiety as we understand it today, he spoke eloquently of the restless mind, the fearful heart, and the suffering that arises from our resistance to life's inherent unpredictability. In the ancient Pali texts, he described dukkha, often translated as suffering or unsatisfactoriness, as the first of the Four Noble Truths. This suffering, he taught, stems from our clinging to permanence in an impermanent world, our desperate grasping for control in a reality that defies such mastery. The essential cause of our suffering and anxiety, explains Buddhist teacher Judith Leaf, is ignorance of the nature of reality, and craving and clinging to something illusory. This is what Buddhism identifies as the ego, our constructed sense of a permanent, separate self that must be protected at all costs. And as Leaf notes, the gasoline in the vehicle of ego is fear. Our anxiety, in this light, is not merely a psychological condition to be managed but a profound signal pointing toward a deeper truth about our existence. The Buddha taught that all beings experience a deep sense of fear or anxiety, arising from our resistance to the impermanence that defines our lives. We feel anxious because we sense, perhaps unconsciously, that everything we hold dear, our health, our relationships, our achievements, our very lives, is subject to change and eventual dissolution. We build elaborate mental fortresses against this knowledge, yet the fortress walls themselves become the source of our suffering. Consider for a moment the last time anxiety gripped you. Perhaps it manifested as worry about the future, regret about the past, or a vague sense of unease in the present. In that moment, weren't you, in some way, resisting what is? Weren't you caught in the gap between how life is unfolding and how you believe it should unfold? This is precisely where Buddhist wisdom offers its most profound insight, not in eliminating anxiety entirely, but in transforming our relationship with it. The path of mindfulness, central to Buddhist practice, offers us a revolutionary approach to anxiety. Rather than seeing anxiety as an enemy to be vanquished, mindfulness invites us to turn toward our experience with gentle curiosity and compassion. In the words of Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, the only way to ease our fear and be truly happy is to acknowledge our fear and look deeply at its source. Instead of trying to escape from our fear, we can invite it up to our awareness and look at it clearly and deeply. This approach stands in stark contrast to our instinctive response. When anxiety arises, we typically employ one of two strategies. We either fight against it, attempting to suppress or eliminate the uncomfortable sensation, or we flee from it, distracting ourselves through endless activities, substances, or digital stimulation. Yet both approaches ultimately strengthen anxiety's grip, creating a cycle of suffering that can seem inescapable. Buddhism offers a third way, a middle path that neither suppresses nor indulges our anxious thoughts and feelings. This path begins with the simple yet profound practice of mindfulness, of being fully present with whatever arises in our experience, including the sensations of anxiety themselves. As we learn to observe our anxiety with non-judgmental awareness, something remarkable begins to happen. The anxiety loosens its hold, revealing its impermanent nature. Renowned Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron shares a powerful parable in her book, When Things Fall Apart, about a young warrior who is instructed by her teacher to face her greatest fear. When asked what she fears most, the warrior replies, fear itself. Her teacher advises her that instead of fleeing from fear, she must go toward it, bow to it, and ask, may I have the courage to face you? May I understand who you are? Only by approaching fear with respect and mindfulness does the warrior discover that fear's power diminishes. This wisdom points us toward a revolutionary understanding. Anxiety itself is not the problem, it is our relationship with anxiety that determines our suffering. When we resist, judge, or attempt to eliminate anxiety, we inadvertently strengthen its power over us. But when we learn to relate to anxiety with mindfulness and compassion, we create the conditions for genuine healing and transformation. The 6 Buddhist habits we will explore together form a path of mindful engagement with anxiety, not to make it disappear, but to transform our relationship with it, gradually cultivating a sense of safety that arises not from the absence of fear but from our ability to meet life's uncertainties with an open heart and a clear mind. These practices, refined over centuries of contemplative tradition and now validated by modern neuroscience, offer a way to work with anxiety rather than against it, ultimately revealing the possibility of peace even in the midst of life's inevitable storms. The journey of healing anxiety begins with a simple yet profound recognition: our breath is always with us, a constant companion from our first moment of life until our last. In Buddhist practice, mindful breathing serves as the foundation for all other forms of mindfulness. When anxiety sweeps through your body like a sudden storm, your breath becomes the anchor that can ground you in the present moment, the eye of the hurricane where stillness can be found. Imagine yourself sitting by a clear mountain stream. Your thoughts and feelings are like the water rushing past, sometimes turbulent, sometimes gentle, but always in motion. Mindful breathing allows you to be the bank of the stream rather than the water itself. You observe the flow without being swept away by it. This is the first of the 6 Buddhist habits for healing anxiety, establishing presence through mindful breathing. The Buddha taught a practice called anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing, which begins by simply noticing the natural rhythm of your breath. You don't need to control or change your breathing, simply observe it with gentle attention. Notice how the air feels as it enters your nostrils, how your chest and abdomen expand and contract, how each breath differs slightly from the one before. When anxiety arises, this simple practice can create a crucial space between stimulus and response, between the trigger and the cascade of anxious thoughts that often follow. Modern neuroscience now confirms what Buddhist practitioners have known for centuries. Conscious breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, our body's natural calming mechanism. With each mindful breath, you send a signal to your brain that you are safe, gradually unwinding the physiological response of anxiety. This is not merely a temporary distraction but a fundamental retraining of your nervous system, establishing new neural pathways that support a sense of safety and groundedness. As your relationship with your breath deepens, you become ready for the 2nd Buddhist habit, the rain practice. Developed by Buddhist teacher Michelle McDonald and elaborated by Tara Brach, rain offers a structured approach to working with difficult emotions, including anxiety. The acronym stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Nurture. When anxiety arises, the first step is to recognize it, to acknowledge its presence in your body and mind without judgment. Perhaps you notice a tightening in your chest, a shallow quality to your breathing, a sense of dread or restlessness. Simply naming this experience, this is anxiety, can begin to create space around it. In the words of Buddhist psychology, what you can name, you can tame. The next step is to allow the experience to be there, just as it is. This doesn't mean you like it or want it to continue, simply that you cease the struggle against what is already present. Imagine anxiety as a frightened child tugging at your sleeve. If you repeatedly push the child away or scold it for being afraid, the fear only intensifies. But if you simply allow the child to be there, acknowledging its presence with a gentle "I see you," something begins to shift. With this foundation of recognition and allowance, you can then investigate your experience with kind attention. Where in your body do you feel the anxiety most strongly? What thoughts accompany the sensation? What does this anxiety need? What message might it be carrying? This investigation isn't an analytical process but a compassionate inquiry, approaching your experience with the curiosity of a scientist and the warmth of a dear friend. Finally, you nurture yourself with self-compassion. Perhaps placing a hand on your heart, you might offer yourself words of comfort. This is a difficult moment. May I be kind to myself? May I give myself the compassion I need? This step recognizes that anxiety, like all emotions, responds not to harsh judgment but to gentle understanding. The third Buddhist habit for healing anxiety is the cultivation of metta, or loving kindness. The Buddha taught that fear and anxiety arise from the illusion of separateness, the belief that we are isolated beings navigating a hostile world. Loving kindness meditation directly counters this perception by systematically developing feelings of warmth and goodwill toward ourselves and others. The practice begins with offering loving wishes to yourself. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. From this foundation, you gradually extend these wishes to others, loved ones, neutral people, difficult people, and eventually all beings. Research in contemporary psychology reveals that loving kindness meditation activates brain regions associated with positive emotions and social connection, directly countering the isolation that often accompanies anxiety. A story from the Buddhist tradition illustrates the transformative power of loving kindness. A young monk was assigned to meditate in a forest known to be haunted by malevolent spirits. Night after night, fear overwhelmed him. He approached his teacher, who advised him to extend loving kindness to the spirits rather than fearing them. As the monk began to wish for the well-being of these beings he once feared, his terror gradually transformed into compassion, and the forest became a place of peace rather than dread. The fourth Buddhist habit involves embracing impermanence, a core teaching in Buddhist psychology. Anxiety often stems from our resistance to change, our desperate attempt to create islands of permanence in a constantly flowing river of experience. Yet as the Buddha observed, everything that arises also passes away, our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations, and indeed, our very lives. When anxiety grips you, try gently reminding yourself, this too shall pass. Not as a dismissal of your experience, but as a recognition of its inherent transience. Anxiety, like all mental states, is not a fixed entity but a flowing process, characterized by change. It may seem solid and unchanging in the moment, but like weather patterns in the sky, it will inevitably transform. This understanding leads naturally to the fifth Buddhist habit, cultivating non-attachment. In Buddhist teaching, attachment, or clinging, is identified as the root cause of suffering. This doesn't mean avoiding close relationships or abandoning goals and aspirations. Rather, it suggests holding our experiences, our possessions, our relationships, and even our identities more lightly, recognizing their impermanent nature. When anxiety arises, notice what you might be clinging to, perhaps a particular outcome, a self-image, a relationship, or even the idea of being anxiety-free. As you gently identify these attachments, you can begin to loosen their hold, creating space for a more flexible response to life's inevitable uncertainties. Non-attachment doesn't mean indifference, it means loving without grasping, caring without controlling. The sixth and final Buddhist habit is walking the middle path, finding balance in our response to anxiety. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from both indulgence and suppression of our experiences. With anxiety, we often swing between these extremes, either becoming completely identified with our anxious thoughts or attempting to suppress them entirely. The middle path offers an alternative, neither drowning in anxiety nor denying its existence, but relating to it with mindful awareness and compassionate presence. This balanced approach recognizes anxiety not as an enemy to be vanquished but as a messenger carrying important information about our relationship with life itself. As we integrate these 6 Buddhist habits into our daily lives, we begin to discover something remarkable. Anxiety doesn't need to disappear for us to feel safe again. True safety emerges not from the absence of challenges but from our growing capacity to meet life's uncertainties with mindful awareness and an open heart. Like a tree with deep roots, we learn to bend with life's storms without breaking, finding stability not in rigid resistance but in flexible strength. Consider the journey of Sarah, a woman who had struggled with debilitating anxiety for most of her adult life. Her days were filled with persistent worry about the future, her nights with restless rumination about the past. Medical treatments had provided some relief, but the underlying sense of unease remained, a constant companion that colored her experience of life. When Sarah first encountered Buddhist mindfulness practices, she approached them as she had approached other treatments, as a means of eliminating her anxiety. But as she worked with a skilled meditation teacher, she gradually understood that the goal wasn't to become anxiety-free but to transform her relationship with anxiety itself. She began with simple breathing practices, learning to anchor her awareness in the present moment rather than projecting into an imagined future or ruminating on the past. At first, it felt uncomfortable to turn toward her anxiety rather than away from it. But as she continued to practice, she discovered that anxiety, when approached with mindful awareness, began to reveal itself as a complex tapestry of sensations, thoughts, and emotions rather than a solid, unchanging entity. The rain practice became a particular refuge for Sarah. When anxiety arose, she would pause to recognize its presence, allow it to be there without immediately trying to change it, investigate it with gentle curiosity, and nurture herself with kind words and soothing touch. What had once felt like an overwhelming tsunami gradually revealed itself as waves of sensation that would rise and, inevitably, fall away. As her practice deepened, Sarah began to notice the narratives that accompanied her anxiety, stories about not being good enough, about deserving to suffer, about needing to control the uncontrollable. Through the lens of loving-kindness meditation, she learned to relate to these narratives not as absolute truths but as conditioned patterns, meeting them with the same compassion she would offer to a frightened child or a dear friend in pain. The Buddhist understanding of impermanence offered Sarah a particularly powerful perspective. She began to notice how her anxiety, despite feeling permanent and solid in the moment, would inevitably shift and change. Some days it was more intense, other days barely perceptible. Sometimes it manifested as physical tension, other times as racing thoughts. This recognition of anxiety's changing nature helped loosen its grip on her identity. She was not an anxious person, she was a human being experiencing anxiety, among many other states of mind and heart. Non-attachment didn't come easily to Sarah. Like many of us, she had been conditioned to believe that happiness came from getting and keeping what she wanted and avoiding what she didn't want. But gradually, she began to see how this very approach generated much of her suffering. As she loosened her grip on specific outcomes and fixed identities, she discovered a more spacious way of being, one that could accommodate anxiety without being defined by it. The middle path taught Sarah that she didn't need to eliminate anxiety completely, nor did she need to resign herself to suffering. Instead, she could find a balanced response, acknowledging anxiety's presence without giving it more power than it deserved, meeting it with mindful awareness rather than aversion or attachment. This journey of transformation is available to each of us. It doesn't require extraordinary abilities or perfect circumstances, only a willingness to turn toward our experience with mindful awareness and an open heart. The 6 Buddhist habits we've explored are not quick fixes but invitations to a profound shift in our relationship with anxiety and, ultimately, with life itself. Imagine for a moment that anxiety is like water. When we resist it, struggling against its current, we exhaust ourselves and may even risk drowning. When we surrender completely, allowing ourselves to be swept away by its force, we lose our direction and purpose. But when we learn to float, neither fighting the water nor passively surrendering to it, we discover a different possibility. We remain in contact with the water, feeling its movements and temperature, while also maintaining our buoyancy and direction. This floating quality, this ability to be with our experience without being overwhelmed by it, is what Buddhist mindfulness practices cultivate. Through consistent practice, we develop what psychologists call distress tolerance and what Buddhist teachers might call equanimity, the capacity to be with difficult experiences without becoming reactive or overwhelmed. As we continue to practice these 6 habits, anxiety gradually takes its proper place in our lives, neither ignored nor all-consuming, but simply one aspect of our rich and varied human experience. We discover that safety doesn't come from eliminating all threats or challenges but from cultivating the inner resources to meet whatever arises with presence and compassion. The Buddha once compared the mind to a wild elephant, powerful, unpredictable, potentially destructive when untrained. Through mindfulness practice, he said, we gradually tame this elephant, not by breaking its spirit but by establishing a relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Similarly, we learn to work with anxiety not by attempting to crush or eliminate it, but by relating to it with mindful awareness and compassionate presence. This approach requires patience and persistent practice. Some days, anxiety may feel manageable, other days, it may seem overwhelming. The key is not perfection but continuity, returning again and again to these practices, especially when anxiety is at its strongest. Each time you meet anxiety with mindful awareness rather than aversion, you strengthen neural pathways that support resilience and well-being. Each time you offer yourself compassion rather than criticism, you cultivate the inner resources needed for lasting transformation. Remember that this journey unfolds in your own time, in your own way. There is no standard timeline for healing, no fixed sequence of stages through which everyone must pass. Honor your unique process, celebrating small victories and treating setbacks with the same compassion you would offer to a beloved friend. As you continue to integrate these 6 Buddhist habits into your daily life, you may find that anxiety, while still present at times, no longer defines your experience or limits your possibilities. Like clouds passing through the vast sky of awareness, anxious thoughts and feelings arise and dissolve, while the spacious quality of your mindful presence remains unchanged. This is the promise of Buddhist mindfulness practice, not a life free from challenges, but the growing capacity to meet life's inevitable uncertainties with an open heart and a clear mind. Not the absence of storms, but the ability to find peace even in their midst. Not a perfect existence, but a fully human one, embracing both joy and sorrow, ease and difficulty, with equal measures of mindful awareness and compassionate presence. As you walk this path of transformation, may you discover the safety that has always been present within you, not dependent on external circumstances but arising from your inherent capacity for mindful awareness and compassionate presence. May these 6 Buddhist habits support you in your journey toward healing, toward wholeness, toward feeling safe again in your own skin and in this precious, impermanent life.